So on Monday's show, I said the worst thing that you can do in college football is enter a new regular season feeling confident, feeling sure of yourself, like you knew everything that transpired the previous offseason. And that is still true. The second worst thing that you can do in this sport is to take everything you saw in week one and let that paint the picture for week two and beyond. We're going to try to avoid doing both of those. Well, we're going to try avoiding doing that one. We already made the first mistake, entering the 2025 regular season with what I thought to be the knowledge of everything in the world. We're going to try to avoid overreacting as we head into week two. I hope you all do the same. Welcome into our Wednesday episode of the SpringBlake College Football Show. It is September 3rd. We are sandwiched in right between a fantastic week one, which ended Monday night with North Carolina getting decimated by TCU. I don't really have on the docket for us to talk about that game that much. If you want my opinion on it, what else should we have expected? That's my 2 cents on it. I want North Carolina to be good, but what else could we really have expected? So we're sandwiched in between that. We've also got a really fun Week 2 college football slate coming up. It's obviously not the 3 top 10 matchups that we got this past weekend, but we've got one really great preview game between Michigan and Oklahoma that we're going to discuss today as well. We have got a really fun Friday night matchup of the James Madison Dukes taking on the Louisville Cardinal in what will probably be the only game JMU can afford to lose if they are to try and make the G5 spot in the college football playoffs. Today's episode, we are going to get into my updated Sweet 16, which for those of you that are new to this show, it is just my top 16 teams in college football. We're going to go through, we haven't done this since the first week of this show, so it's almost been a full month since we've gotten to go and tweak things in the top 16. Again, a power rating system, not a power rankings. We'll get into that at the top of that segment as well, too. We're going to recap what we saw Sunday night between Miami and Notre Dame, the Hurricanes winning that one 27-24. And yeah, I think that's all about it we got for today. But before we get into all of that, again, this is your favorite ball knower's favorite ball knowing show. And if you want to know ball and you want to learn how to know ball, and maybe you already know ball and you've come back here. If you are someone trying to become a ball knower, thank you for tuning into this very first episode. Make sure if you are watching on YouTube to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and interact with all of our other videos and clips that we do. I try to put out as much as I can on that platform. If you are listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you may get your podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. Please subscribe to the channel. Any interaction and support that you give to this show, I will give tenfold in terms of great content. Make sure to also head to my socials, that is Twitter and TikTok. Follow at SpringBlakeCFB. We'll have more betting content on there, just general thoughts. Maybe if you're circling the bird 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, maybe get a little Spring Blake thoughts. You know, if I've partaken in any fun activities by the end of the evening. Just support this show wherever you can. We're about a month in. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. It's been very fun, and I look forward to just continuing this on, hopefully for the rest of my very long-lived life.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So before we can get into week 2 and my Sweet 16, we obviously have to finish one final game that we saw in week 1, and that was Notre Dame heading to Miami, losing that one by a final score of 27-24. And just like for LSU, just like for Florida State, this was a massive win for the Miami Hurricanes. I believe it's their first top 10 victory in nearly 8 years. They were 0-8 in the previous matchups against other top 10 rated teams. So many things to take away from this game and feel good about snowballing into the rest of the year. The first being the defense was night and day better. Complementary football is so important in this sport. Last year, they were very talented up front, but it didn't matter because the secondary was so weak. It really didn't give the time for the defensive front to be used to their best strengths. The secondary very much looked the part of a repaired unit, and it's, a combination of Corey Heatherman coming in as the defensive coordinator, some nice portal additions. They already had a really strong corner that came back to join this team, and it was a really well-rounded effort on Sunday night. Now, There was one blown coverage at the end by Notre Dame, and it wasn't perfect. They did allow Notre Dame's offense late in the fourth quarter to get things rolling. But overall, compared to what Miami got out of its secondary last year, it's hard not to look at this game and say, hey, it may not have been perfect, but it's a lot better than where we were. And in turn, as I said, it helped things up front a whole lot more. The Hurricanes held Notre Dame's offensive line and great run game to just 3.5 yards per carry. Jeremiah Love, best running back in college football, to just 33 yards on the ground. Combining what you had, combining defensively what the Hurricanes were able to do in this game. And again, we're not overreacting, but at the same time, I know that's a good Notre Dame football team, and I know Miami did the best they can to tighten things up at the end. So if you combine the upgrade you got on defense and also not that much of a drop-off offensively, you've got a really good football team here. Carson Beck was awesome. He was awesome, man. 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not everything was perfect, but you saw so much of Carson Beck that reminded you of his 2023 season, where he did have a really nice offensive line at Georgia, where he did have really nice run support, where he had really talented wide receivers. Last year was bad, but as I said, coming into this year, there's a few quarterbacks that found themselves into situations like this, Jackson Arnold at Auburn being another. Yeah, you might not be this otherworldly number 1 overall pick that people might have thought you were going to be, but you also need help around you to be good. You need an offensive line. You need run support. I don't know if there's like a Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers on this Hurricanes team, but the playmakers there seem to be better than they were at Georgia last year, and Beck played the part of a really effective quarterback. Now, does he have the high-end athleticism and these two-way abilities to be a Heisman finalist like Cam Ward was? No. Does he have the ability to keep Miami above average offensively as one of the better offenses in the ACC and push them towards what should be an ACC title game berth? More than enough. He's more than capable of doing that. So I thought the receivers did a nice job making huge plays when it was needed out of them. Obviously, the highlight grab in the end zone there was one of the better catches we've seen in college in quite some time. The movement that Miami generated on both sides of the trenches was massive. When we previewed this game, I said that the Notre Dame defensive front seven is very talented, but I also said that Miami has 3 dudes at 340 pounds or more. And you could just see as the game wore on that Miami's offensive line had the bigger density and just was able to keep generating movement for the ground game. Mark Fletcher, Chamar Brown combined for 120 yards in between the tackles there. Again, everything offensively for the Hurricanes, it didn't maybe flash as much as it did last year, but it had to flash that much last year because everything else around it was so bad. This looks like a fully built out unit for Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes here. The coaching staff, I love the additions they made, and really, the U feels back. Last year was a missed opportunity because of their defense. They might not have the flash they did last year, but overall, I think the team is in a much better spot. The other thing that was really cool about this game is that, Miami gets out to the big lead. Notre Dame starts marching back a little bit. Your best players made big plays in the most crucial times of the game on both sides of the football. For Francis Mauigoa, the offensive tackle, who should be a first-round pick next year, it was, I think, like a 3rd and 4 run where they got stuffed, but Mauigoa saw that and pushed the pile for a first down. You had this awesome effort by your best player on offense, and then defensively, Ruben Bain was great the entire game. In those final couple of drives, and specifically the last one where Notre Dame was trying to get into field goal range, Ruben Bain was all over the place, delivered some huge plays there. So it was just very cool. On top of a full-hearted effort for 60 minutes there for complimentary football, when the game was on the line, your best players stood up and made a difference, and I thought that was a huge win for Miami. Hopefully snowballs into what could be a potentially great season in South Florida.
My name's Blake.
Now, to flip things over to the Notre Dame side of the football, I don't walk away from this game being like, oh, that run they had last year was cute. We probably won't see them back in the title conversation again. I thought they put up a hell of a fight despite everything that was being thrown at them in the first game of a new season. The offense was very clunky. They lost the turnover battle 2-0. They probably had to put a little bit too much pressure on CJ Carr's shoulders, but I thought he also responded well down the stretch. He finished the game with 221 yards, 3 total touchdowns, did have 1 pick. I would say there were some really bad plays. There were also some really good plays. I thought that touchdown run was really impressive, reminded you of kind of the Riley Leonard impact he had on that team last year. I think, all things considered, you put a guy in his first career start in Miami in August, raucous environment against a really good and improved team. I thought he responded well, and I think a game like that is going to be a nice tone setter for the rest of this season. One thing that stood out for Notre Dame the most to me as the game wore on, their big boys were a little gassed. And that was just as the game wore down, the defensive line wasn't able to generate as much movement. It's a very talented front seven, but they got put in a game fresh into the season, fresh into a new year. You know, we talked about how tough it is for defenses to just go from fall camp, go from an off season, then just snap. You're in a new game. You're playing full 60 minutes. For that, it was Notre Dame had to deal with that, but then they also had to be put in Miami in August. I know it's hot around the country. The humidity you have to deal with in that game, 60 minutes of football. The other team has been practicing in that for months straight. I understand why Notre Dame felt a little gassed. This game ended up getting away from Notre Dame's preferred style. You know, they weren't able to generate much movement at all in the ground game. I think that won't be an issue for the rest of the season. They're going to be able to run the football. It was concerning that Jeremiah Love couldn't do too much, but I think the Miami defense really just knew to hone in on that and make CJ Carr beat them. So all in all, Notre Dame got forced outside of their traditional style of football, and we're still there right at the end of the game. So I don't leave this being like, man, I got to bump Notre Dame down a bunch in my power rating system as we head into week 2. I thought in a raucous environment, quarterback had to do a lot in his first career start. They responded really well. I still think Marcus Freeman is one of the best coaches in this sport. And I almost look at this game and in kind of like a positive light for the Fighting Irish. Like, yes, because you're not in a conference, you can't really afford to lose your biggest games, and it makes the game with Texas A&M in a couple weeks that much more important. But for the fire that they got thrown into, for the fact that the style of game got taken away from what they traditionally would like to do, they had to throw the football more to keep pace with Miami's offense, I can leave this one saying, I can see why Notre Dame could still be in the picture for a national title when it's all said and done. So that was my thoughts on Miami, Notre Dame. Let's transition a little bit because it is time for my Sweet 16. Part 2, my Week 1 Sweet 16. How does the AP poll do it? Did the AP poll put out its Week 1 top 25, or is this their Week 2 top 25? I'm going to pull this up. AP poll. So the AP poll is technically in week 2 when it releases. So this one is the Week 2 AP poll. I don't have it pulled up exactly because we're recording this before it comes out. A little peel back the curtain. So this is going to be the Week 2 SpringBlake Sweet 16. And this is my power rating system. It is not a resume ranking, and that is so important because you guys are going to get mad at me when I go through this list, and you'll say, well, hey, that team just beat that team, but you have that team still higher than that team. There's about 2 to 3 instances where that happened. This is not a resume ranking. I am trying to use the SpringBlake eyeball test and say if I put this team versus this team on a neutral field this Saturday, who do I think would be favored in the game? That is what I'm trying to do here. That's what a lot of people do in this sport now. They don't look at resumes. Resumes are cool. Go to the AP poll for your resume rankings. Go look at, at Joe Schmo on Twitter who's like, Florida State is now the number 1 team in the country because they beat Alabama. I'm sure a lot of people are going to put LSU up as the number 1 team in the country. They're still, technically not closer to 16 than to 1, but they're not my top 5. LSU had a really good win on Saturday. They're not in my top 5. I am taking a look at the teams collectively and saying, okay, if I put Team A versus Team B on a neutral field, here's how I think it would be favored. So again, this is not, if you're someone that pays close attention to college football, this isn't foreign over the last few years. There's guys like Kelly Ford, who puts out his rankings and ratings, the SP Plus ratings. There's FPI that puts their stuff out, where I saw Texas was still number one. I'll call this, if you want it, my ball knower eyeball test. The ball knower eyeball test, or just my Sweet 16. These are my top 16 teams in the nation. We're going to go from 16 to 1. Not going to spend too much time on it. When I used it in the preseason, it was a full episode because I was like, I need to tell you what I think about these teams. We'll kind of just brush through a few things that stood out from week 1. Maybe there was nothing that stood out and they just stay right where they were. But let's kick things off. For the first time in the SpringBlake Sweet 16, my 16th team, let's take that from the top. This might be a nice social clip, so let's kick her off there. My first team, my first new addition into the SpringBlake Sweet 16 poll is the USC Trojans. They were a team in the preseason I had floating just outside the top 16. They were in that 17 to 20 range. 600 total yards of offense last week. They won by 60 points. Yes, it was against Missouri State. I kind of liken USC to LSU, which we'll discuss just a little bit here, where, both of these teams really bad defensively in 2023. They make some awesome defensive coordinator hires in that offseason. In 2024, the LSU and USC defenses were definitely better than what they were before. And I think this year they're going to be some of the better groups, more improved groups that we see in the nation. So yes, I'm putting USC in here after they looked really good against a really shitty team. But I think what I saw defensively from them, I can paint a picture here to where this might be Lincoln Riley's best team since arriving in Southern California. The Trojans at number 16. Another new addition up at number 15 to me is the Tennessee Volunteers, another team that was floating just outside as we geared into the season. The reason I had to wait for Tennessee, I needed to see the quarterback play to truly visualize what this offense was going to look like. I came away very impressed by Joey Aguilar. I thought the run game was huge versus Syracuse, and that was, it shouldn't be a concern because it's never been a concern under Josh Heupel. It's just people didn't know, okay, well, how is the line going to look? How are the new running backs going to look? Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop combined for 174 yards on the ground. Joey had some really nice timing throws deep down the field. You can see this offense, a way for it to resemble what it looked like before Nico, where it was one of the more potent ones in the nation, where it wasn't so up and down. He was also pretty mobile in that game as well, too. Tennessee, definitely worthy of being a top 16 rated team in the nation. Moving along to number 14, I've got the Michigan Wolverine, who are up 2 spots from where they were in the preseason. I had them at 16. They're now at 14. This is, to me, a lot of the same parts that we've come to expect out of Michigan the last few seasons. It is, smash mouth football. Really great defense, really good run game, and hopefully efficient play at the quarterback position despite not having lethal talent on the perimeter. And we're going to talk about Michigan more in the show because they play another top 16 team for me. We'll preview that game at the end of this show. They're still very empty at the wide receiver position, but they did have tight end Marlon Klein show out this past week, lead the team in, I believe, receptions, yards. I think he got a score. I can't remember. Really good tight end one for this team. A nice go-to safety valve for Bryce Underwood, who I thought looked really good in his first collegiate start at the age of 18. So Michigan definitely in the second tier of the Big Ten, but certainly a top 16 team in the nation, and hopefully they continue on with a really big game coming up Saturday. Number 13, another team up 2 spots for me, are the Miami Hurricane. One of the few teams that showed me the most in week 1. Carson Beck was great, as we just talked about. Trench play was awesome and really just leaned on what I believe to be a well-built Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team. Outside the one blown coverage, the secondary looked much improved. Corey Heatherman, an awesome addition there at defensive coordinator. Miami always scares me. This was one thing that we didn't talk about. Mario Cristobal in these tight games, you just are like, oh, fuck. Is he going to do it again? Is he going to do it again? Hopefully getting over that hump against Notre Dame and not doing it again will kind of put that in the past, but it's hard not to get a little bit tight when you think that Miami has had this big lead and all of a sudden it's tied. You're like, uh-oh, he's going to do it again. Still one of the best teams in the nation. My number 13 team in the country as we head toward week 2. Down one spot to number 12 are the Oklahoma Sooners. The only reason they're down is because I did have to leapfrog another team a few spots up. Mateer looked awesome against Illinois State, 400 passing yards, 4 total touchdowns. One thing that was really weird was their running game as a whole, but specifically Jaden Ott. He just got 1 carry in this game after being listed as the team's running back 3 on the depth chart. Jaden Ott was one of the prize additions of the transfer portal. At least he should have been. And so I don't know what the plan is there. You know, he was a little banged up in fall camp, so maybe they're just trying to keep him fresh for week 2 against Michigan. Maybe they'll need him a little bit more in that game. Something that a number just pops out to you and you're like, I wonder what that means. We're going to keep our eyes on that. But overall, it was a good effort from the Sooners offense. My only concern with this team still comes down to their offensive line play. I thought it looked good against Illinois State, but that's Illinois State. They got Michigan coming up this week. There's a pretty big difference between the two. All that said, Oklahoma, my number 12 team in the country. We're going to have a little bit, how big of a run do we have on it? Okay, it's a little broken up, but we got a nice chunk of SEC teams coming up here. At my number 11 spot and down 2 slots from the preseason are the Texas A&M Aggies. People are a little tense about A&M. They did put away UTSA at the end. They didn't cover that game. I think it was 42-24 was the final score. I think that was the final. I still think UTSA is like just a really potent offense, even though they're a G5 team. I think they're a talented one at least. Passing offense for A&M, I don't think too highly of UTSA's defense, but like if this is what we're gonna get, this is why I think Texas A&M is of top 12 caliber. Marcel Reed, 22 of 34 for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Mario Craver was the big addition from Mississippi State. He had 8 grabs for 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. Casey Concepcion, he was the prize addition at wide receiver coming from North Carolina State. 3 catches for 72 yards and a score. Also returned a punt for a touchdown. Really, really strong effort from the passing game there for A&M. A sign of hopefully good things to come as the season progresses. One thing I'll say about A&M, and I think this is the other reason that people might have been a little concerned, is that the run game wasn't really there. And that's interesting. I'm going to take a quick break here to talk to you guys about this. Notre Dame, best running game in the country potentially, at least the best running back in Jeremiah Love. They looked pretty rough. You have, who was the other team that I was just mentioning? A&M. I think that's one of the best duos in the nation running the football. They looked really weak. I could say the same about Texas. I could say the same... I guess Georgia's looked all right. There were just a few teams where I was like, oh yeah, the strength of your team is the run game. And then we got through week 1 and it was like, what happened to the run game? So that was a little concerning for A&M, but I don't know. Maybe they just didn't really give all too much of a plan there. I think maybe early in the season they wanted to get this passing game more comfortable against lesser opponents so that way they can figure out what they really have from that position group. A&M, long-winded way of saying still a top 12 team to me. They moved back a little bit, but my number 11 team in the country. So at 10, we have my second biggest faller of the week. That is the Clemson Tigers. And to make a drop like this, they moved down 6 spots. They were my number 4 team in the preseason. I talked about this in the recap show. I wanted Clemson to be something that I don't believe they are. And if we're just dating back to the beginning of last year, 0-4 against the SEC, I don't think of LSU as that same caliber of Georgia, as that same caliber of Texas that they faced in the playoffs last year. So that was kind of the one to me where I was like, maybe I'm just trying to force Clemson to be something they're not. Cade Klubnik has also been really bad against top competition, against the SEC. 0 touchdowns, 7 interceptions in those last 4 games. We spoke about that in the preseason. I think I looped in Notre Dame as well, too. His numbers drastically worse than when playing against the ACC, a conference not really known for that many great defenses. I still think they're a really good team. They'll be a college football playoff team. The reason for such a harsh reaction here, the eyeball test, I was confusing my brain and my eyes. My brain was telling me and my heart was telling me, like, no, Clemson is that. Clemson is what you expect them to be, what everybody's telling you they are. I think they are a damned good football team, but there's a difference between being the best team in the ACC than to being a tier 2 team in the Big Ten or a tier 3 team in the SEC. That is where I see them more, instead of being, this is one of the top 5 teams in the nation. Again, I don't want to overreact, but we do have a year plus of information to take into account here. Clemson drops down 6 spots, still a top 10 team for me, and we'll see where things pick up for them through the rest of the regular season. Conveniently, right after Clemson at number 9, I've got the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, this is the official biggest slide. And this, again, you don't want to overreact in week 1. I just said that. Alabama's probably going to come out this upcoming week. Is it ULM or something? I forget who they have. They're probably going to look awesome, but I slide them down 7 spots. They were my number 2 rated team in the country heading into the season. The furthest drop. The reason being, in a predictive model thought process, in the offseason, I look at the coaching staff, of which I think is top 5 caliber in the country. I look at the roster and the talent on the roster. I believe it's still of top 3 talent in the country. But the mental makeup of both of these groups, the roster and the coaching staff, has to pull some weight here and drop this team down. And again, this isn't like Texas where it's one game of something that was different and like, oh, let's overreact to that. No, this is a year plus of effort. This is a 5-5 football team over the last 10 games. They have lost 4 games where they were double-digit favorites. For as talented as you are, you cannot lack mental effort, and that is why I bumped Alabama down to 9. Now, some people probably sit there and are saying 9 is still too high. I get it. I still think at the end of the day, they're going to be one of the better teams in the country. I think that the trench play will be much improved. We talked about the absence of Jam Miller, the top running back, who I thought was going to have an awesome season. He'll be back around that Georgia time frame at the end of September. They were also without Tim Keenan at defensive tackle, their best run stuffer. And that is 2 just really monumental losses on both sides of the football that can at least paint me some sort of excuse to why they look so bad in the trenches. Again, the effort is the reason that they lost this game, but I'm not going to overreact and push them out the top 16. I'm not going to put Florida State above them either. I think if you put these 2 teams on a field again, Alabama would still be favored, especially if it's on a neutral site. So that'll be the first one where I've mentioned, hey, this team beat that team, but you have that team higher still. Alabama would be favored on a neutral field if they had to play Florida State again this Saturday. It's just how the sport goes. But still, big adjustment here. Now, I still want to buy into them. I still believe they're a playoff caliber team when you think of talent and coaching. If the effort is not there, they will continue to slide and eventually fall out of this Sweet 16 rating. So I think up next I've got another team that was are they my biggest risers? One of my biggest risers. I had 3 teams move up 4 spots, moving up to number 8 in the Week 2 SpringBlake Sweet 16 rating system are the LSU Tigers, another team, much like Miami, that just proved the most to me this past weekend, showing that you can win in a rock fight, showing that Nuss doesn't have to put up 40-plus points, but he can kind of just manage the game and pick the right moments to make big plays. Super impressive win for LSU. My one warning, I said this on Monday's show. This is the one, like I said, people are going to have LSU up as their number 1 team in the country. I have them here at 8. You're like, oh, well, why is that so different? I wonder if by week 8 we look at the outcome of this game totally different. If LSU is struggling in conference play and you're like, wow, what happened to their offensive line or what happened to their defensive line? Maybe they just went up against an ACC team. Georgia went up against Clemson last year, and Clemson wasn't the same in the trenches as they were this year, but Georgia blew them apart in the trenches in that game. I'm just being patient with LSU. and I want to see, okay, against Florida, against Texas, how does your trench play line up with those teams? That's what I'm going to look forward to, and that will be when I can start to creep LSU closer to my top 5. For now, though, still moving them up 4 spots, my number 8 team in the nation. Just ahead of them, another team that moved up. They moved up 3 spots. This is one where it's like, I had to drop certain teams. We dropped Clemson pretty big. We dropped Alabama pretty big. I got the Florida Gators as my number 7 team in the country. And this is tough because it's not like they did anything to show me why they needed to be 7. Like, yeah, they beat the crap out of Long Island University. I think the final score was like 56 or 55 to nothing. DJ Lagway was great when he, was on the field. I think he played maybe a half, 15 of 18 for 120 yards, 3 touchdowns. They were smart to not use him in the run game, save him for this really tough stretch that they're about to go on. The craziest schedule in college football starts this Saturday for the Florida Gators. They've got a tough game against USF. I think Florida's going to win it. It's a tough game because USF is really well coached. They've got a really fun offense. And that is just the appetizer, because after that, Florida has to go at LSU and then go at Miami. Oh, then they get a home game. Oh, wait, it's against Texas. Well, they have to stop after that, right? Like, that's murderer's row. No, after that, they go to A&M. USF, LSU, Miami, Texas, A&M. 4 teams that I have in my top 12. And then beyond that point, they get Mississippi State, but right after that, it's Georgia. Florida has it so tough this year, and I feel really bad because it's, like I said, it's my 7th rated team in the nation. This will be the team that sits in my top 10 throughout the season, even if they are a 500 football program, because I think the schedule is just that unfair. So if we're sitting here in October and Florida is 2-3, and you're like, well, why do you have them as your 9th best team? They lost to teams that were ahead of them, and I think they beat the teams that were behind them. So hopefully, we get some really fun games. Hopefully they can sneak out a couple of wins and prove why they deserve to be closer to, 4-3, but still right now, a damn good football team. The Florida Gators, my 7th rated team in the country. I got to get so used to saying rated instead of ranked. It's hard to do. Let's keep moving along here. My number 6 team in the nation. Another one that really didn't have to show me all too much this past week. They move up 2 spots from number 8. A lot of that has to do with teams flushing out, Alabama and Clemson moving down. I've got the Oregon Ducks as my number 6 rated team in the nation. Dante Moore looked great. Because, of course, he was going to in this Will Stein offense, 18 of 23, 213 yards, 3 scores. Again, didn't have to do much in week 1. They've got a couple of tune-ups here before we actually have to see them play real talent. But I know that this is a top 10 rated team in the nation. The funniest stat I think I saw all weekend, the funniest number where I was just like, oh, we're gonna put on the analytics department for this one. Not an advanced stat here by any means. It's just reading and counting. Oregon had 12 guys log a carry on Saturday. 12 guys register a carry. That is just like hilarious behavior by Dan Lanning. All in all, I didn't think they had to show too much. DeCorian Moore, the talented wide receiver, had some really nice plays. He wasn't super involved. I think they kind of took their foot off the gas when they realized, like, oh yeah, we don't actually really have to do anything. Was it Montana State, I believe? Anywho, Oregon, kind of in a situation like Florida here where they move up because Bama and Clemson slide, but it has nothing to do with what they showed me on Saturday. I knew they were going to beat the crap out of whoever they faced. So then we get into our top 5. Now, my top 5, I think, is where people are obviously going to have the most contention. And let's start. My number 5 team in the nation is still my number 5 team from the preseason. It's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. It is just tough for me to move Notre Dame down at all after a close loss in a raucous environment when you had an 18-year-old making his first career start in college, and the style of game you play and the style of game you usually win by, you weren't able to do so. You were forced in a really tough position where it couldn't just be man football in the trenches. You had to throw the football a lot to keep pace with Miami. I don't leave that game saying Notre Dame is now not a top 5 team in the nation. I think they were put in a really tough position in this game. Obviously, when you look at Jeremiah Love's stats, and we talked about this in the recap part of this game, you're like, 10 for 33? Is he banged up? Were they saving him? It's something that you definitely want to watch. But I think the way this team responded in the fourth quarter, being able to tie things up after looking pretty lost most of the day, to me, proved all the fight in the Fighting Irish. And yes, you're going to sit here and say, well, you have Miami down at what, 11, 12? I forget where I had them. And you still have Notre Dame at 5. I think if you were to put these teams on a neutral field after what we just saw on Saturday, I think the Notre Dame Fighting Irish would be favored over Miami. And I think it was just one of those perfect environments for Miami to get a really nice win. I'm not saying Miami's bad by doing that. Miami is also a top 12 team in the country. I just think in that situation, I would take the Fighting Irish as a favorite over Miami if they're on a neutral field in week 2. So that one is one I can understand you guys will be a little bit mad about. This one will probably be your most contentious one. My number 4 team in the nation, a team that is up 4 spots from where I had them in the preseason, it is the Ohio State Buckeyes. One of the 3 biggest risers from my preseason poll. I talked about how amazing the defense was on Monday's show. I don't know what more I need to say, how many times I could say Matt Patricia spanked me around a football field for 60 minutes. The defense was fantastic. The offense, you got to have patience with them. There's so much newness around. I am very curious to see how the run game develops with no Chip Kelly, with no Travion Henderson, with no Quinshon Judkins, because I do think run support is important for any quarterback, but also, first-year starters in Julian Sayin. I wonder at the end of the day if that imbalance on offense eventually holds them back from, repeating a national title or getting to be one of the Final Four teams in the nation. That being said, I did have to make a pretty substantial adjustment here for the Buckeyes, moving them up from 8 to 4 because the defense picked up right where it left off, despite a new coordinator and a lot of new pieces. Very impressed with how they performed on Saturday. The Ohio State Buckeyes, my number 4 team in the country. My number 3 team, and again, this is the part 2 to the part 1 of where you guys will find the most contention here. I still have the Texas Longhorns as my number 3 rated team in the country. I still have them 1 spot above the Ohio State Buckeyes. Just as I said with Notre Dame and Miami, I think if you pull this game out of Columbus, you say, okay, week 2, we're going to do a rematch. We're going to know everything we know from week 1. We're going to pull you out of Columbus. We'll put it in fucking, Florida. Just put them on a neutral site. You're going to have Texas, Ohio State, another week of preparation. I believe that if you gave Sark and Arch a week to look at exactly what Matt Patricia did, they would have some sort of response. I think they would be favored in that game. I think they would win that game. It's that, hard to beat the same team twice. Getting another week of preparation, getting this game out of Columbus, getting the first game jitters out of Arch. If you disagree with me, fine, I get it. But you're also disagreeing with the Kelly Ford model, with the SP Plus model, the FPI. I also don't care if you disagree with me. This is the SpringBlake College Football Show. It's not commenter user 0895124 on TikTok channel. The Texas defense was awesome in week 1. Week 1. They looked fantastic. Front seven's terrific. They allowed 1 deep shot to Carnell Tate, but the defender was still in a decent position. It was just a better play by the wideout. They're very well coached. I think the offense needed to wake up a little bit in the second half. I think if you maybe started that game plan that you had in the second half and did it for 4 quarters, you might have a game that goes into overtime or at least puts up more points or more of an effort. I know that people can't wrap their minds around sometimes the difference between a ratings and a ranking system, but I think situationally everything played into Ohio State's hands there, and if you pulled it out, and again, I'm not saying Ohio State is bad. People are going to be like, you're talking shit about Ohio State. No, I have Ohio State as the 4th best team in the nation. I just think Texas is the 3rd best team. So I don't know. I love getting mad about arguments I know I'm going to have tomorrow on TikTok or the day after on Twitter. Ohio State fans, man, they take this stuff so seriously. I got to say, whenever I put out Ohio State content, it gets the most love. I really appreciate you guys commenting and liking. But man, you guys are on top of your shit whenever someone says something you don't like. So hats off to you. Again, Ohio State 4, Texas 3, which leads me to number 2. This is mentally the biggest correction I made between the preseason and now, and I am just, with my life on the line, putting trust where trust is deserved and needed, and that is why I've got the Georgia Bulldogs as my number 2 team in the nation, up 4 spots from where they were in the preseason. I don't know what you want me to say, man. One, they played Marshall on Saturday. It wasn't like they had this top 10 matchup like some of these other teams did, but I liked what I saw out of Georgia. The things we needed to see fixed the most looked fixed. Zachariah Branch, the transfer addition at wide receiver, he was amazing. I finished with, 3 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. His twin brother Zion led the team in tackles defensively. Gunnar Stockton was great, 200 through the air, 70 on the ground, 4 total touchdowns. Still need to see the run game figure itself out outside of Gunnar, but again, kind of like not in a Riley Leonard way, but you're going to get 30, 40 yards out of your quarterback in games like that. Man, I just have trust in Georgia right now more than I do every other team in the nation. And I think they should be, they were my pick to have the best record in the SEC. So this isn't like a crazy movement. I needed to see a few things from Georgia to start the season. I saw those things, and now I'm reevaluating and putting them as my number 2 team in the country. And that leaves us to number 1, which number 1 stays the same from where it was in the preseason. It is the Penn State Nittany Lions. They don't move at all. Aller was great. He threw 22 of 26, 217 yards and a touchdown. The motherfuckers did get backdoored at the end of the game, which pissed me off. They were covering against Nevada. Not for the entire part, but once they got to that comfy zone, you're like, all right, this is fine. And there was seconds left. Blew it. I think it was like 20 seconds or something left. Blew the back door. What I needed to see out of Penn State, I got. This was the other team. I was trying to remember who the other team was, where the running game is the strength, and you were like, what happened to the running game? The running backs, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, were fine, but like surprisingly not as dominant as you would have expected. But it didn't matter, because the thing that I needed to see the most out of Penn State, I saw. Kyron Hudson, Traber Pena combined for 13 catches, 163 yards, and a score. Both were terrific. And again, just shows you what you needed to see out of Penn State. If I believe Penn State to be a team that will play for a national title and will win the Big Ten championship, I needed to see some talent on the perimeter. I think they have it, and I think that's something that is going to carry this team to a lot of great heights in 2025. So that rounds out the Week 2 SpringBlake Sweet 16. Again, 1 Penn State, 2 Georgia, 3 Texas, 4 Ohio State, 5 Notre Dame, 6 Oregon, 7 Florida, 8 LSU, 9 Alabama, 10 Clemson, 11 Texas A&M, 12 Oklahoma, 13 Miami, Michigan at 14, 15 Tennessee, and the USC Trojans as my number 16 rated team in the country.
Blake. What?
So that probably still took up more time than I wanted it to, so I need to find a better way to breeze through the Sweet 16. We do have one more thing to discuss on today's show. We have to preview the game of the week, and we've got an awesome game of the week in Week 2. It's not a top 10 matchup, but it's 2 teams in the SpringBlake Sweet 16. Michigan at Oklahoma. The Sooners are 5.5-point favorites. The over-under is set at 46.5. Now, I might be wrong. I thought this spread was initially at 2.5 when I checked before Week 1. And it looks like it's grown a few points since then. But 2 SpringBlake Sweet 16 teams, both coming off of tune-up games in which, yeah, they looked great, but you would also be like, oh, that scored. It wasn't like they won by 60. I think Illinois, Oklahoma put up 35. Michigan won by 14, 17, 21, somewhere in that range. this to me is basically your week 1 matchup. I didn't necessarily take too much away from week 1. We're going to talk about the things that I did take away, and I'm like, okay, maybe that will have an impact on the game. But as I said, the biggest mistake you can make in this sport outside of thinking you know everything heading into week 1 is taking week 1 and letting it dictate how you look at week 2. So, for instance, New Mexico did hang around with Michigan, specifically on offense, but at the same time, Michigan's defense was kind of letting everybody play, letting everybody get reps. They wanted to see who they had on their defensive roster, and because of that, it wasn't this cohesive unit working together on the field at all same times. So, conversely, Oklahoma's offensive line, which I believe to be the weakness of their team, looked really good. But also, they played a crappy Illinois State team. How will that look against Michigan? Probably a little bit different. I wanted to do something new here with game previews. I didn't love the way that we did them last week. We're going to change it up. Not what I know, what I think I know. We're going to just talk about paths to victory. We're going to start with Oklahoma. Their path to a win on Saturday, to me, is tempo, tempo, tempo. Ben Arbuckle can really stress out this Michigan defense if he plays his cards right. And by that I mean, quickly getting to the line, not letting the defense settle if you're sustaining long drives, lots of RPO, utilizing the quarterback run, misdirection, all of that stuff that requires the defense to think. And why that's important for Michigan is Wink Martindale is such a blitz-heavy head coach. It's so aggressive. But you can beat that aggressive style by a lot of trickeration. I've talked about this game a million times on this show now. When Texas went up to Michigan and Michigan was like, we're just going to throw fire at your offense, Sark was like, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, creative, 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 and they put up 30-plus points. Deception, motion, misdirection on offense are going to be huge for this team because I think it's a real mismatch for an aggressive, blitz-heavy type defense. And I also think Oklahoma has the personnel to match it. It's not like they're at a talent deficit. Michigan's defense is really good, but Oklahoma has talented wide receivers. They've got a really talented two-way quarterback, a better offensive line, and talented running backs. So I think when you combine in dictating the tempo, being the aggressor, matching Michigan's fire with even more fire, I think that's your best path to a victory on Saturday, specifically on the offensive side of things. Now, for the Oklahoma defense, defensively for Oklahoma, it comes down to not letting Michigan into third and manageables. We know what Michigan is going to do on offense. The last thing you want is by the third quarter, this time of possession battle is 2-1 in Michigan's favor. If they are getting to 2nd and 4 or 3rd and 2, your defense is going to be tired by the 3rd and 4th quarter. There's just no way to handle that. We've seen it time in and time out. Michigan's offense just do that to opponents and just wear them down, muck it up in the trenches, and try and pull out like a 13-10 victory. Oklahoma has one of the best defenses in the nation at all 3 levels. And despite the secondary potentially being the weakest level, they still have a clear talent mismatch between Michigan's wide receivers. That being said, you gotta keep everything clean up front and in the middle of the football field. I would leave the corners on an island on the perimeter. I would say, hey, you've got a young quarterback making his first legit hard start of his career. He's 18 years old, and you don't have talented wide receivers. If you beat us on the outside and down the field, so be it. Hats off to you. The way I don't want Michigan to beat me is because they're finding their tight ends in the middle of the field, or they're getting to 3rd and 2 and they're just bullying you between the trenches because you're spending too much focus on the outside. So that is, to me, on both sides of the football, the way for Oklahoma to get a win on Saturday. Michigan's path is obviously the converse of that. Very different. You just have to play Michigan football, but you also need a sprinkle of quarterback magic from Bryce Underwood. Michigan's front 7 in this game should be the biggest mismatch they have all day. And I don't know if it's a substantial one. We haven't seen Oklahoma's offensive line tested this year. I do think it's the weakest unit of their group, and I do believe Michigan's front 7 is the strongest unit of their group. How substantial of a mismatch is that might decide, Michigan's ability to get a win here, a tough road win in Norman. I do believe Michigan's front 7 is of top 3 caliber. Oklahoma's offensive line isn't like a top 20 to 25, but they're also not a, 50th or below. It's kind of right in between that path there. So it's super important to see early on how the front seven is gaining traction along the Oklahoma offensive line. And so important in this game, as it is for a lot of games at the collegiate level. Quarterback contain is huge, paramount for the Michigan defense. Derek Moore, TJ Guy on the edge, they have to be so sound in the way that they keep John Mateer in the pocket, because I do not believe that if Mateer is able to roll out or to get these extended plays where the receivers have more time to break open or find the soft spots in coverage, I don't think you're going to be able to stop the Oklahoma offense if they're able to do that. If you are able to generate pressure with your defensive tackles and then on the outside keep John Mateer flustered in the pocket, all of a sudden he's not able to use some of his best abilities the way that he probably wants to on Saturday. So you just have to, you really have to keep this offense stuck up front, keep the quarterback in the pocket. That's the best path for Michigan's defense to get a win on Saturday. It is tough that you're going to be without Jayshon Barnum for the first half. Really dumb targeting call. I hate it for the sport. I hate it that it's in a meaningless game, and now you have to miss half of your, one of your most important games of the season. It will be really interesting to see how they fill the void there in the first half. Can you get to halftime and keep this game manageable so you can get one of your better players back? That's going to be massive for them defensively as well. For offense, for Michigan's offense in this game, the path to a victory is to slow the motherfucker down. Slow it down. Put Justice Haynes in between the tackles 18 to 20 times and learn early on if you can lean on Oklahoma's front seven. You might be able to early on. I know you probably will by the end of the game. The end of the game doesn't matter if Oklahoma is up by 10 points or 14 points. You need to learn early on. Can you lean on them? Can you sustain long drives early on? Can you make Oklahoma's front seven gassed by the middle of the second quarter? That is going to be massive. I don't think Michigan has like this elite offensive line that they had in years past, but it's a very good group, and they have a really good running back in Justice Haynes, who comes over from Alabama. I think that you're going to be a little bit outmatched on the perimeter. So, well, I don't think, I know. I know that Michigan's offense is going to be outmatched on the perimeter. I don't think you're going to win this game by putting up 30 points and pushing the football down the field. Now, that being said, you do probably need Bryce Underwood to be special as well, which is a really tough ask of a guy in his second career start, his first against a Power 4 conference opponent. He's 18 years old. That being said, I saw some really nice throws from the kid on Saturday against New Mexico. There was one, I don't even know what kind of route you're talking about. It was almost like a slot fade, but it was a little bit shorter than that. And Underwood hit the guy in stride. It was a beautifully placed ball. He had a few throws where you're just like, okay, I see why they gave him all the money. I see why he's starting at 18. You need him to be special on Saturday because it's a little bit different of an opponent than New Mexico. I think it's going to have to come on the ground as well, too. Can you get him running the football 7 or 8 times when the defense thinks they've done a great job of tightening up on your receivers, and maybe they are a little lax back? Maybe can you get that 3rd and 6th run for a first down to keep moving the chains? You're going to need him to make a handful of special plays for Michigan if you want to win this thing. So those are the paths to victory for both of these teams. Now let's try to land the plane. This is one of those games that 10 weeks from now we are going to be talking about. In my opinion, it is. Because, I always get nervous that this thing stops recording. Does it? I have no idea. Anywho, let me land the plane on this thing. This is one of those games where 10 weeks from now we are going to be talking about, because I believe that Michigan and Oklahoma are going to be on the bubble of playoff contention by the end of this season. And it's unfair to look at how a team is in week 2 and compare it to week 12, but head-to-head matchups between the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be pivotal at the end of this thing. Massive implications in this game. Let's also not forget Sharon Moore is returning to Oklahoma, where he played college football for a couple of seasons, graduated in 2008. This is also going to be his last game before the 3-game suspension that he's serving. So this just has like it's week 2, but it has a lot riding on it for the Michigan Wolverine. And for Oklahoma, after everything they had to deal with last season and how bad they were, especially on one side of the football, this is one of those games that can cement like, okay, no, Venables is the right guy. We made the right additions, and we are going to be frisky, not just in the SEC, but also the playoff conversation. We get really good defenses, 2 really special prospects at the quarterback position. You know what I think about both of these teams if you've been listening to the show for a while, so you know where I'm going to go. At the end of the day, I think that Oklahoma's speed advantage on offense, having a quarterback and offensive coordinator that I trust more, will be a slight difference maker. I'm not comfortable saying that Oklahoma is going to go in there and light the world on fire and everybody's leaving that game being like, wow, national title contender. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be low scoring, but I am going to take the Sooners to win 24-21. So we are right on the edge of that over-under total. It's sitting at 46.5. I'm predicting 45. I'm predicting the Wolverine to cover. I think it's going to be a really nice effort from Michigan. I don't think they're going to get bullied around by Oklahoma, but I am going to take the fact that Oklahoma can stretch the ball down the field a little bit more, or I know that the offensive coordinator is one of the best in this sport and can dial up just maybe a couple more plays to beat a really talented Michigan team. I'm going to take Oklahoma to win this one narrowly, but still feel really good about the start to their 2025 season. All right, and that's going to wrap it up for today. I don't know if you guys can see on the screens, but AC hasn't kicked on in here, and I am a sweaty boy right now. That's why we leave the sleeves off. Thank you guys for listening to another SpringBlake College Football Show. We'll be back Friday. I think we still have 1 or 2 more games to preview. We're going to talk best bets. We're going to talk about how to watch week 2, how to get your ball-knowing guide to watching college football. And then we'll carry it on into another week. We're just rolling now. There's going to be the same type of show every single week, where Mondays we recap what happened, Wednesdays it's the poll and game previews, and Friday we fit in whatever we can before we head into the weekend. Thank you guys so much. Again, please support this show however you can, whether it's liking on YouTube, subscribing to that channel, leaving a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. I really appreciate the support that we're getting. Follow my socials at SpringBlakeCFB on Twitter and TikTok. I love you, I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days. Peace.